Welcome to the Chase Podcast. Dr. Ron Charles is a renowned archaeologist, author, historian, speaker, missionary, and is known as the Christian Indiana Jones. Dr. Charles has spent over 50 years researching and uncovering truths about Jesus Christ and information that proves the historical authenticity of the Bible. Visit cubitfoundation.org for Dr. Ron's books and information about this global ministry.
In the life of Jesus, as you well know, various case scenarios pop up when we talk about healing. You know, Jesus himself healed by touching people. He healed by other people touching him, touching his garments. He even healed from far away. And so his entire being, his entire makeup was healing. And so this morning, I want to share with you a story about Jesus that perhaps you've never put together as being a major and a significant part of Jesus' healing ministry. But if you will bear with me and stay with me, you will see that this particular story reaches down to the very depths of healing, because this healing took place when there was no other way it could happen. So turn with me, if you will, to the book of Luke, chapter number 4. An interesting thing about the book of Luke, if I can share with you very briefly before we read the scriptures. Back in 17 A.D., Tiberius Caesar, the emperor of the Roman Empire, the emperor of the world, so to speak, had a dream. And in this dream, there appeared to him a man who said that in the reign of Augustus Caesar, there was born in the eastern provinces of the Roman Empire a man who would rule the world. His kingdom would last forever. His dominion would be throughout the world, and that he was the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So Tiberius set out to try to find this person. His name wasn't mentioned. But he knew that it was in the eastern provinces, which would be Syria, Judea, the Galilee, and all that area. And so he put together a special commission. And this special commission's sole purpose was to go throughout the entire East and to try to find this person who was born, who would be the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and whose kingdom would last forever. Well, Jesus came under scrutiny because of the things that he was doing, intense scrutiny, and healings, and walking on water, and calming the storm, breaking bread and fish, and feeding multitudes, and that type of thing, which just didn't happen every day. And so Jesus came under intense investigation by this commission, and then Jesus was crucified. And Tiberius went absolutely berserk, because he said that of all of the men in the entire world, this one could have been this great king. But now he's dead. Tiberius never did believe in Jesus' resurrection, but he did want to know all about him. And so the commission set out to get all the information they could about Jesus, this man Jesus, and their purpose was to gather all the information about him, as well as the influence that he had on the world after his death, and certainly after his death and resurrection. And so the one member of this commission was a man by the name of Theophilus. and Luke was hired by him. Now, Luke was not a believer at this time. Luke was an attorney out of Antioch who became a physician. And he is brilliant man. And while he was collecting information about Jesus is when he became a believer in Jesus. He interviewed more than 300 people. And through this interviewing of these people, he got a good picture of Jesus, who he was, and all about him. And so the book of Luke is his report that was given to Theophilus. And the book of Luke, as well as the book of Acts, all was this report about Jesus' life and his influence upon the world. And so this report, what we now call the book of Luke particularly, was read to the Roman Senate, and became in the Roman records as an official, truthful documentary about the life of Jesus. And so we'll read this portion. And so everything that is in the book of Luke has been cataloged and has been identified and proven time and time again through eyewitness reports. And some of those eyewitness reports were Romans, and they gave testimony to the truth of Jesus' life. So let's look at the 4th chapter of Luke. Very familiar story that all of you have probably heard, but perhaps not heard in depth. Okay, verse number 38. Okay, that's Luke 4, verse 38. And he, meaning Jesus, arose out of the synagogue, and this was a synagogue in Capernaum, and entered into Simon, this is Simon Peter, Simon's home. And Simon's wife's mother, this is Simon's mother-in-law, and the early church history calls her Lucretia, entered into Simon's house, and Simon's wife's mother was taken with a great, which means deadly and or death, fever. And she besought him, and they besought him for her. And he stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her. And immediately she arose and ministered unto them. Now when the sun was setting, and they that had any sick with divers diseases brought them unto him, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. Now, the official Roman report that was given and written was about this event. His name was Marcus Omericus. He was the governor general of Tiberius Caesar for medicine. So he would be the guy that's over medicine in the Roman Empire. Now, this particular event took place in September of the year AD 27. Now, Rome was trading all over the world at that time. They would get lead from Britain. They would get zinc from what is now Ireland. They would get horses from what is now Eastern Europe, Russia, Poland, and that area. Gold came from Africa, and as well as in Saudi Arabia. They would get ivory out of mid-Africa. Salt came from Austria, and spices such as pepper and some of that type of thing came from India and from what is now Pakistan. And so these trade routes went all over. Now, there was a situation happen. There was a disease that began in the Roman trade routes They had not hit the earth for more than 800 years. And so because of that, they didn't recognize it when it hit, and they didn't know where it came from, what caused it, or how to cure it. And this disease was very similar to what became known as the bubonic plague. Now, the bubonic plague was caused by fleas. Fleas that infested as its host rats. Well, what would happen during these trade routes is that the fleas on the rats would jump to a bigger host. They would infest the mules and the horses and the camels of the caravan that was carrying goods back to Rome. And so this thing began in January of 25 AD. And 25 AD. And so it happened in what is now the region of Tibet, Nepal, and that particular area. A large caravan of more than 800 camels and horses was making its way into Rome, carrying various spices, spikenard, pepper, and that type of thing. Well, as the caravan moved, people began to die and began to get this disease that no one knew anything about. And what would happen is that they would develop the tumors underneath their arms and on their neck. And then they would get chills, and they would be vomiting, as well as diarrhea and various other things, sweating profusely. And they didn't know what it was. They didn't know what had happened. They didn't understand how to cure it. But they did know that if these tumors burst of their own accord, then the fluid that was in there went into the air, and the people would breathe that air, and then the disease would go into their lungs and go throughout their body through the bloodstream. Well, as the caravan continued, 10 died, 100 died, 1,000 died. By the time it reached the Euphrates River a year later, 310,000 people had died. Not only of the caravan, but the surrounding communities and the towns that they went through, making their way to Rome. Tiberius Caesar just went ballistic. He said, put a stop to this immediately. So the governor general of medicine, Marcus Americus, was sent to the Euphrates River. He stopped the caravan on the eastern side of the Euphrates and said, you will go no further until we find out what this is. Well, he began to experiment. The caravan stayed there for about 9 months. During that time, the disease gradually went down in intensity. The number of people dying reduced considerably because they weren't traveling. They weren't picking up any new people. And so they did find out, though, that if these tumors were lanced and the fluid caught in a towel or something and discarded, then the possibility of survival was greatly increased. If you let them break of their own accord, then they breathe that stuff inside. But if you lance it to yourself and catch it, then it greatly reduced that chance of death. And so Americus was very satisfied after the end of 9 months that this disease had been stopped or at least slowed down, so he allowed the caravan to continue. But as he did, and as they moved, then it picked up again. More people got sick, more people were destroyed. Tiberius Caesar said, make a stand. And so in the city of Damascus, Syria, Americus was there to receive the caravan, and it was there that they stopped everything. They said, you will not go any further unless this is resolved. So while in Damascus, he did some experiments and discovered not necessarily what caused it, but certainly the symptoms of the disease, and catching it soon enough could be helpful in eliminating the disease. Americus came up with an idea that did work, but it was devastating. The very last symptom that people received when they had this disease before death was a high fever. 100% contagious once you get the fever, and 100% death with the fever. And so what Americus did, with the permission of the emperor, is that he investigated and examined every single person in Damascus, whether it was old or babies, whether it was a hierarchy of society, the very rich or the beggar on the street, didn't matter. Everyone was examined. And those that were in which the tumors had burst of their own accord, they were placed in their home. And anyone that they came in contact with, anyone that touched them, talked to them, breathed the same air that they breathed, that was shut up in their home. Those that had the tumors but had not been broken of their own accord, they were lanced. But those that were shut up in their homes, Americus himself documented who they were, the day, and put a torch to the house. Everyone inside, the ones that had the disease and those that had come in contact with those folks, were burned alive. There were 16,000 people burned in Damascus during that time, but it did stay the disease, and it stopped in Damascus. And so Tiberius gave them permission to continue on to Rome, that it looks like the disease had run its course and that now we can continue. But within a week after they continued, it came back. More people became infected with it, and more people died as a result of it. In August of the year 27, the caravan was approaching the Galilee, Decapolis, various areas like that. And in the latter part of August of the year 27, the caravan entered into Capernaum on its way to Rome. They didn't know what to do. Throughout that entire period between Damascus and Capernaum, America set fire to numerous houses, killing many, many people, burning them alive. And that's the only thing he knew how to do. The only way to stop this horrible disease that was infecting everyone they came in contact with. On the Sabbath day, Jesus was there in Capernaum with his disciples. Simon Peter's home was there, and Simon's wife and her mother were there. Jesus was in the synagogue, participating in the Sabbath rituals and so forth. And when Jesus left to go into the synagogue that day, Simon's mother-in-law, Lucretia, was sick, and she was in bed, but she did not have the fever. But while Jesus was in the synagogue, then he was summoned by somebody, Peter perhaps, or Andrew, or one of them. He was summoned because Lucretia now had the fever. 100% fatal and 100% contagious. If Jesus went there, then he would have to be shut up in the house with the rest of the family, because he had come in contact with her, breathing the same air that she was breathing. But Jesus was summoned even though it had been proven that this woman was dead for all practical purposes. She could not survive. 100% death guaranteed. There was no way of looking at it other than that. For sure, guaranteed death. But Jesus was summoned, and even though he knew the consequences, he knew what would happen, he knew that Americus was there with the torch ready to burn the house, Jesus went anyway, putting his own life in jeopardy, not only from the disease, but also from the burning of the house. Americus was the only one who set torches. And so when Jesus came to the home, Americus was already there. And he warned Jesus about going inside, but Jesus went in anyway. Then Americus picks up on his report. He says, when the rabbi from Capernaum entered into the home, I shut the door and locked them in. And all who were in there knew that they would die. Now, according to the word of God, when Jesus entered, he raised Lucretia up. And even when there was a healing with the tumors being lanced, it usually take between 2 and 3 weeks for the person to get the energy to get up, even off the bed. But according to our records in the Bible, she got up immediately. That's right. And began to wait on them. But she couldn't go outside because of her diagnosis. America says, as he was putting the torch to the house, the door swung open. And Jesus came outside with the woman who is 100% guaranteed of death. And he said in big, bold letters that was presented to the Roman Senate, on that day, the disease was stayed in Capernaum. It went no further. For the rest of the day, those that were affected with the disease came to this home, and Jesus healed them all. All day, all night, healed them all. Anyone who came. And many of those people were non-believers in Jesus. He saw the need, and he met the need. And so even though there was no possible way of life, Jesus counterbalanced it with his own power for healing. That disease never returned to the Roman Empire for 196 years. If the disease was not stopped in Capernaum, it would have went on to Rome, killing, they estimate, perhaps as many as 1.3 million people. And those people, for the most part, didn't know Jesus, but he prevented their death anyway. It didn't return to the Galilee, Decapolis, Judea area for another 360 years. Estimating that if you take those years with the average amount of deaths that happened in that year, Jesus saved the lives of more than 8 million people. All because he was summoned when it was impossible to have life. You may feel that your sickness is beyond repair. You may feel that your disease is beyond what can be helped with the doctors or anyone else. But even when it's guaranteed death, Jesus can be summoned. And if he is summoned, he will respond to you. That's right. So regardless of your situation, Jesus has shown us very vividly that impossibilities are things that are not in my vocabulary. And things that you feel are beyond repair, that are beyond the ability of recuperation and healing. Jesus says, just summon me. Don't think that this is the end. Don't think that it's impossible. It doesn't matter. Summon me. And if you do, I will respond. So today, many of you have come to be healed. Perhaps you've come for the healing of another person, family member, spouse, that are at home sick or in another state, or perhaps even in another country that are not doing well, and you are standing in their place. You know, there's no distance in prayer, right? You pray right now, and the Lord answers right now in Russia or in Germany or Mexico. And it's right now. And so what had to happen first was the summons. And I am pretty confident, I don't know for sure, but I'm confident that if Jesus had not been summoned, Lucretia would have died. She would have been burned up with the rest of the people that were in that home. But even when it was impossibility, whoever come to get Jesus knew that there was a spark of hope. And Jesus turned and returned to the home and healed the unhealable, raised the unraisable, and brought life to that was death. He can do the same for you today. And he will do the same for you today, because we are going to summon him.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ron Charles of the Cubit Foundation. You know, we've been in Middle East for going on 30 years. And I would love to come to your church or your meeting to let you know what's happening in reality in the Middle East. And we'd love to come there and let you know what's happening, what the Lord's doing in that part of the world. So if you can contact us at thecubitfoundation.org, then we can come to your place. And if you would like to find out more about us, then go to www.cubitfoundation.org. Thank you.
The Chase with Dr. Ron Charles is sponsored by supporters of the Cubit Foundation. Visit cubitfoundation.org for Dr. Ron's books and discover how you can support this global ministry.